All right, folks. So here my latest 10-minute motorcycling video. So let me combine, I guess, a bunch of things. So I've been kind of busy for the past 3 weekends or so, just doing some checking really to kind of figure out what bike I want to buy next. So I'm somewhere between financing and performance. I have to admit that. Okay, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to fall on the financing performance curve. So I had gone to try to buy an S1000RR and failed. I'd gone and try to buy a 757 or 767 Ducati and failed. So I keep having to move my purchasing down the financial scale. Let's just put it that way. So I went online and basically price checked a bunch of different bikes, a bunch of different dealerships in the DC, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia area. And I found a few that I thought would be a good fit for me financially and performance-wise. Went and checked them out. It's been a long 3 weeks, a lot of driving, 1,500 miles worth of driving, let's put it that way. And I've realized a lot of things in the meantime between the driving and just thinking about motorcycling in general. But first, let's start with where I went. So first I went down to Village Cycles again in Uniontown, Virginia for a demo of the Kawasaki Z650 and the Z900. I then went to Roanoke, Virginia, which was a three-hour drive southwest of Village Cycles, to catch the Yamaha demo the same day that I went to Village Cycles. And I got there just in time to take one ride that day, the last ride of the day. I missed the second to last ride by about 5 minutes, but I got there and I rode the R1S, which was available, took it out for a ride one more time. Then the next weekend, I went up into Pennsylvania, started off at Camp Hill, which just south of like Harrisburg, and at Yamaha Triumph KTM of Camp Hill, rode a older FZ8 they had. Then I went to Pittsburgh and rode a 2007 FZ1 that they have for sale there. And the next weekend, which is this weekend, I went down to a Yamaha demo, down at Ron Ayers Motorsports in Greensburg. I believe it's Greensburg, North Carolina. Greensburg, Greensville, one of the two. But they had a nice shop down there, nice place. They had a big old sort of North Carolina party down there. Had guys down there doing drifting and stunning and stuff. 2 guys. They had a Kawasaki truck there. I think they had Ricky Gadsden there and a couple other of famous Kawasaki riders. So they definitely put on a performance there, but unfortunately Kawasaki did not actually have any demos riding going on there. But Yamaha did. Yamaha had their standard demo. Yamaha's had a lot of demos this month, and so they had a Yamaha demo there in which is really kind of eastern North Carolina, and then there were 2 in Tennessee. But the problem is the Tennessee demos were like 10 hours away to the west. Like halfway into Tennessee and in the west side of Tennessee. As much as I wanted to go there, I ended up not going. It was just too far. Mapping out everything, it was just way out there in the middle of Tennessee from the place in North Carolina. So it was one or the other. And even the Tennessee, even if I'd gone straight down there, it still would have been like an 8-hour drive to go down there. And I didn't want to go out to Tennessee for to ride a couple of bikes just, and then try to go back the same day. It would have been an overnight thing. And I really wanted to go out there, but I had some car trouble just after I started. Literally caught some kind of crap in my tire, and it took me like 2 or 3 hours to straighten that out. And so by the time I got this straightened out and looked up and everything, it was midnight, and I was like, there's no way I'm going out to Tennessee. It's midnight. I'll probably get there right when the demo is ending that day, and it was only like Saturday. So I said, screw it, we're just going to go down to North Carolina. And I was basically 3 hours away at that point from the North Carolina demo, so I went down there, got there at 10:30, got on the next ride at 11 o'clock, rode the FC9 again, and got the next demo after that, and rode the XLR, I believe it's the XLR, 900 that I rode. For two reasons. One, because the particular bike that I rode was actually on the showroom floor next to the Yamaha stand. And second, because it was a close derivative of the FC9, but it was, more of a scrambler type bike, and I wanted to see, just how it rode. I just wanted to see what the differences were between the base FC9 and this bike. Now, I'm not going to hit this in particularly chronological order. I'm just going to tell you a few things summary-wise. One was I noticed that the FC9 for this year has a fully adjustable suspension, front and rear, along with ABS. So they have, knocked it up a notch to where the FC1 used to be, where it had the fully adjustable suspension front and rear, but it didn't have ABS. I think the FC1 was like just before they stopped making it, and just before ABS came across Yamaha's desk and was put on all their bikes, including the R6. The R1 had ABS and had traction control, but the R6 did not have it until this year. So it's good to see that the FC9 has now a full suspension. Still not anything more than their base, I guess, is KYB suspension. It's not like it's the top of the line, not even Showa really, or big piston fork or anything like that. But it's something, it's a step up. And I actually rode the FC9, and one of the things I noticed about it is how easily it is to change the riding modes. Now, that's been one of my big things with the Ducatis, is you can change the riding modes, but it's awkward. It's a stupid way of changing. Like, you have to hit the turn signal, and then there's two other buttons below the turn signal that actually page you up and down through the menus and stuff like that. And even then, it's awkward. It's really awkward to do it. It's not like it can't be done, relatively quickly. But then there's the question of, do you have to be at a stop, or or do you have to just close the throttle? And I think you have to be at a stop to do it with the Ducatis, with the 959 and Panigale and even the Monsters. The Monsters, I think, have a simple switch which changes the mode, but the Panigale 959 and the Panigale 1299 definitely have this thing with the turn signal. It's definitely a more complicated thing. The switch on the throttle hand is definitely the way you want to go. And with the FC9, it's really simple. You can even do it while you're riding it, while it's moving. You just close the throttle, hit the switch, it'll instantly change from one mode to another, and it's really easy to do. It's the way it should be done. I think with the other bikes, there's like a lever. You can switch it left to right, and it changes modes. Like the old R1 had a lever. You can go from AB to standard mode and so forth. Same thing with the FC1. But with the FC9, it's just a button you hit, mode button. And I want to talk about it a little bit. So I'm going to talk about these bikes just a little bit more. I want to go into a little bit more detail. So we're going to spend another 10 minutes or so. I'll try to hit the highlights here. All right, so specifically with the FC9, I actually did enjoy riding it. It is definitely a much more enjoyable bike to ride in B mode, I think, than even standard mode, and certainly not A mode. A mode, the throttle response in A mode, and certainly I think what happened is, and it's sort of the same thing that happened with the FC9, the FC1 in like the last 2 years that it was out, where they just kept making the throttle response more and more aggressive. Such, you only have to slightly twitch, and this became the problem with that bike. It really does have a fair amount of power off idle, and if you make it so you just barely tweak the throttle just a little bit, it's too aggressive. And I think that's what happened with the later models, is they just got prohibitively aggressive to ride, and I didn't like them. But the older ones, like the 07, 08, 09, had a nice throttle response. It was powerful, but you still had to move your hand somewhat. You had a little rotation before you get all this power out of the bike, which I think is a good combination. It's nice to have a lot of power, but you also sort of should have to twist the throttle and work for it a little bit to get it. You want some control, and you get control by having to turn the throttle more than just twitch, just taking up the slack, let's put it that way. So the A mode on the FC9 is way too tight in that sense. You barely have to twist your throttle a little bit, and you get this surge of power, surge of acceleration. It really is just almost uncontrollable, in my opinion, in that regard. Certainly too much for me, for comfort, for riding on the street. The standard mode is a little bit looser. You might have to turn the throttle like a couple degrees to get the same amount of acceleration that you would in A mode if you twisted it by half a degree. But I still found B mode to be the most fun mode, because it did allow you to really get in there and twist the throttle. The power was definitely, the throttle response was definitely slow enough where you hear this nice roar as the throttle was open, and it gave you a lot of performance without too much sensitivity in the throttle, and it was nice and fun to ride like that. And I thought it had enough acceleration for it to be fun to ride, but I still think it was really kind of mellow in the sense that it was only so much acceleration. It was not as powerful as the FC1, the 2007 FC1 that I rode in Pittsburgh, but I would say it was close to the FC8, and I was surprised by how potent the FC8 engine was, even down to 2,000 RPM. I mean, it rolled on really nicely. I really had a hard time faulting the engine on that bike. I was surprised, because I've ridden that bike 5 years ago maybe, when they last made it, and it was on the demo rides for Yamaha. Probably the first demo I ever really went on. I rode it at Romney Cycles a long time ago, and I found it to be a potent bike, a nice power, but not overwhelmingly so. Not a lot of power, and this is the thing, you really don't know exactly what throttle mode it was in at the time when you're just learning about throttle modes. I'm telling you, it's one of the things you really should understand first and foremost about these bikes now that they have these modes, is exactly how to get to the different modes and try them all. Don't just ride it in one mode. Try all of the modes, while you're on a demo ride. Find enough space on a straight to play with these modes, to try the different modes, and do it safely, because you will be surprised by how much more power, or how much more sensitive they are in the A and the B modes away from standard. Give it a shot. Don't just stick it in the weakest mode and say, I'm going to try it this. You got to find out what those modes are like, because they're definitely going to change the characteristics of the bike. So, unfortunately, when I rode the R1S in Roanoke, I didn't have the opportunity to do that. But they'd already set the bike up in almost the most aggressive mode. It was like the most aggressive street mode, with the traction control on one and the ABS on one, and in a slide control off and stuff like that. Just short of the race mode. It was a solid aggressive mode, and it was Fun to ride. I think the R1S was definitely fun to ride. It lost all that throttle lag that I saw when I rode it in New Jersey with more conservative settings. And I certainly thought it was a good, potent acceleration bike. Good handling. Although the riding position is definitely a little bit weird because the triple clamp is so narrow on that bike, and your hands are really more close together than even a normal sport bike with clamps. But it was fun. It was a fun ride. I thought it was nice and responsive and came off idle well. Could revved up through from the lower RPMs well. Much better than the old R1. Much better than when I rode it in New Jersey. I definitely was even more impressed with that bike than I was when I rode it in New Jersey. And I was fairly impressed with it there. I wasn't quite happy with it because of the throttle lag, but when I didn't have it when I rode it in Roanoke, I still would say that it was still a little bit too aggressive. But I guess the thing is, you have a choice between aggressive, over aggressive, or not nearly aggressive enough and too much lag. But I guess with some fine tuning of the 4 or 5 different settings that you can play with in terms of the mode, you can find something that you're reasonably happy with. And certainly the bike at $13,000 for that bike is a good deal for a leader bike. There's no question. And, let's just leave it at that. Obviously, there are other leader bikes on the market to concern yourself with. But I think that it is certainly a good bike, and I would not mind at all having one. It's just, is it the bike I'd really want? I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't mind having the R1S, no question. Although I did think the springs were definitely too firm on that bike for the street, and very, very often I found my brain bouncing against my skull while riding that bike on the street. They were just harsh front end, very harsh. So no suppleness like the S1000RR with the active suspension. Certainly not like the FC9, even with a noticeably softer suspension. And I really thought the XLR 900 was very nice. I mean, I thought it was a good compromise between like a tracker or kind of bike and a naked like the FC1 even, which I thought was a little bit too clinical, really. Fast but too clinical. Fast but really kind of soulless in the way that it responded. Maybe the exhaust is a little bit too modest and the throttle response was a little bit too linear or something like that. I don't know. I just really wasn't all that impressed with it, although it was definitely fast. There's no question it was fast. It seemed like it would be easy to pop wheelies on it. The throttle response was definitely good. And it revved nicely, but so did the FC9. And one of them is much cheaper than the other one. So, it's kind of hard to say, well, why would I buy the FC1 when I can get the FC9 for $2,000 or $3,000 less? And it's, pretty much as fast as the FC1. It isn't as fast as the FC1, but it's certainly fast. I would think fast enough. Certainly faster, 750 fast, although I wouldn't say it's leader bike fast. And that's the issue. So, enjoyed all the demo rides. Even the Z650 I thought was a pretty nice bike, although the brakes really were kind of bogus. But it's certainly a nice, potent 650. It revs nicely. Definitely has a good engine, and the frame and all is kind of neat. Although I think the brakes and all weren't impressive at all. I didn't even get a chance to ride the Z900, so I can't complain about that because the format of the demo they had there was really kind of cheesy. It was 2 bikes, one Z650 and one Z900, and then a third bike, which, one of the 3, the lead rider would ride, and the other 2 bikes were for the people who came down for the demos. So they're just, out of the fact that there were only 15 people there or something was lucky because there were only 2 bikes and they were only going to ride, maybe four rides per hour or something like that. It was not good. I would definitely have been disappointed if I had come down there hoping to get a ride on that bike and found that I did not get a ride on either the the Z650 or the Z900 simply because they only had 2 bikes there for all the people that came down for the demo. Kawasaki has really, I think, abandoned the demo game, definitely, and Yamaha has definitely taken up their space. Yamaha has a million demos in June and July across the country. Not to mention the track day demos with NJ, like N2, which Ducati's just starting to get into. And they're definitely taking advantage of the fact that the R1 and R1S and R1M are out there and competing very well with just about every other bike in the market. And Kawasaki is backed out of the demo market. So you're not riding a Ninja, you're not riding the new Ninja ZX10R, nobody's riding a 14R. Their bikes are really kind of not being demo, which is why I went for the Z650 Z900 demo. But in the interest of time and really due to the limited number of bikes they had there, I simply didn't stick around to even ride the Z900. I just went ahead and drove 3 hours down to ride the Yamaha demo, figuring I'd at least get a couple rides out of it. And I almost did get a couple rides out of it. If I had gotten there maybe half an hour earlier, I certainly would have gotten 2 rides. And an hour earlier, I would have probably gotten 3 rides. So, but the only ones I wanted to ride were the R6 and the FC9. And so I ended up still not riding the R6, and maybe I'll get a chance to ride that. I just want to ride the new one. Definitely, I still think it's a good-looking bike, especially the new styling they have now looks great. And I still think it is a decent intro bike for the simple reason that it just doesn't make, at least the old bike, just did not make a lot of power below 6,000 or 7,000, maybe really even 7,000 or 8,000 RPM. Was just really a pussycat below 8,000 RPM. The bike is light, fairly nimble, and if it's a matter of how comfortable you are on it and whether you can afford it. But last year's bike was down to like 10 grand, and now the bike is back up to 14. So at 10 grand, it was a really good entry level, I think, bike. It didn't have the harsh braking or really strong braking that the ZX6R has at all. It didn't have the mid-range punch that the 6R has either, but it certainly had enough power, I think, for a casual cruise around town bike that still could come on strong and still could run to 14 grand, if you really wanted to go fast. It could go fast. It wasn't as conveniently fast as other bikes, but it could definitely go fast. And I just thought it might be a decent, opportunity to give it a shot and see what happens. But I haven't actually worked out. I didn't feel like staying. I could have ridden it today, but I didn't feel like staying down there in the heat and with all the commotion going on there. And I really wanted to just get back home. And it was, like a 7-hour drive to get back home. So with the traffic on 95. So all in all, it was a fun 3 weeks. I got to ride a lot of bikes that for most of them I would like to have. It would be nice to have. I wouldn't have a problem having them. The used bikes that I looked at were a little bit too beat up, I think, to really want to buy them. Both of them had been dropped, at least fallen over, and the handlebars and the handlebar mounts were bent noticeably out of shape. Not to mention, I think one of them had steering head bearing issues and the front wheel didn't track. So I really wasn't going to buy that. But I did see some other used bikes that I'm looking at, and I just think I'm at this point where, on one hand, I can probably find a bike that I can afford that I wouldn't mind having and would enjoy riding. But on the other hand, I really am kind of almost too practical. I hate to say too smart, but too practical to really buy another bike. And I see my car is just offering too much for a bike to really compete with, except for the fact that it's not a motorcycle and it's not, you're not riding a motorcycle. And if you really enjoy riding a motorcycle like I do, it's not a motorcycle and there's no way a car is going to really get around that. But as far as road traveling, there's simply no way that a motorcycle can compete with a car for practicality. it's just so impractical to talk about riding a bike for hours at a time. You know, you get rained on enough, that's one thing. You get cold enough, that's another. Your bike gets tampered with, that's a third thing. You're always running the risk of it getting stolen. You're always running the risk of having it break down or have a tire puncture or something in the middle of nowhere at night in the rain. There's just so many things that can go wrong with a bike. Yes, they're fun to ride. They're fun as hell to ride, but there's so many things that are impractical about them. You can't do anything about it. There's no solution. You can't have enough gear. You can't pack enough bags. You can't wear enough, cold weather gear to make a bike as practical as a car. It just can't be done. And the harder you try, the dumber it looks. Your bikes are something to enjoy sparingly and in good weather. It's really, kind of that simple. But I'm at the risk of having this roll on to 40 minutes, so let me cut it short and just say I did not ride a bike that I did not enjoy riding between the FC1, the FC8, the FC9, the R1S, and the Z650 over the past 3 weeks. I could say that they were all quite competent, capable bikes. Obviously, the R1S, would have more power, and the FC9 would have more power, and certainly the FC1 had more power than the FC8, but they all had enough power. Really, they all did. They all revved nicely. They all, in the power arena, they were all quite decent bikes, and I wouldn't complain about having any of them in terms of power or throttling or any of that, jazz. It's really a question of price and, suitability in terms of the riding position. If you can't afford the bike, it doesn't matter how much you like it. You can't buy it and you can't ride it. And if you can't live on the bike for more than an hour or two, it doesn't matter how much you like it or how like the looks or like the engine. You're not going to ride it for more than an hour or two or even 3 or 4 at the most, because it's just going to be a pain in the ass to ride it if the riding position is not comfortable for you. And the only way you can find that out is to get on the bike and ride it. It's that simple. You have to take that chance. But believe me, no matter what bike you ride, there's going to be the time when it's fun and comfortable. Then there's going to be the time when it's uncomfortable but still fun. And then there's going to be time when it's just so uncomfortable that it's no longer any fun, and you're just going to soldier through it for the benefit of having your motorcycle and riding it. I think the R1 hit me first with it being too uncomfortable. The other bikes were all more or less upright, and I really just have to question how long you're going to want to ride at highway speeds on an upright motorcycle. I really think they're a little bit too upright. The one thing about the FC1 is, again, it had lower bars than the other bikes. It just seemed more practical for highway riding. It had a riser bar, but it was still lower than the other, like the FC8, the FC9, certainly lower than the XLR 900. Anyway, enough said. That has been my past 3 weekends, and I hope that you enjoyed my little story. All right, just a couple of quick notes on one of the differences between the older generation FC8 and FC1 and the newer generation FC7, FC9, Z650 and Z900. One of the differences that you see in the newer bikes, which I guess is being driven by cost considerations, is that to go to the smaller displacement models, they essentially remove an entire cylinder, whereas in the older bikes, say the FC1, FC8, the differences are they use smaller pistons. So the only real difference between the FC8 and the FC1 and you may not believe this, but you really kind of have to look at the background for this. But the only real differences are the FC8 has 10 millimeter smaller bore. It's down from 77 to 68 millimeter. It has the exact same stroke, has a slightly lighter camshafts, slightly smaller valves, and revised camshaft profiles. Other than that, the bikes are pretty much the same. The frame and the swing arm is the same. Obviously, there's a difference between the FC1 and the FC8 in the U.S. market, because in the U.S. market, we only got the fairinged FC1 and the naked FC8. There is, in the European market, a naked FC1 and a fairing FC8. The parts are probably highly interchangeable. I know that the dash is probably a little bit different too, if I remember correctly, but and the bars are definitely different. The fact is that these bikes are almost identical, with a minor change in the engine bore and the camshaft and the pistons. All of these things are easily number one thing with a big bore kit is you would put in the bigger bore pistons, you may not even do anything else to it, because the big bore would give you a lot of low and mid-range boost. And if you really wanted to tune it out, you might change the camshafts and the valves. But that's a lot of work, porting the head and things like that. That's a lot of extra work on top. And most people would just really kind of address this with just putting a turbocharger on it. So all these things hark back to the 80s. And I wanted to just say one other thing about this. It's really interesting when you go to these shops that have a wider variety of bikes rather than just standards and sport bikes, or nakeds or standards or street fighters, that you see with the cruisers. You see how Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, etc. have all done a great job, Honda even, have all done a great job of giving Americans American bikes, of cloning the Harley Davidson product line. And the thing about the Ducati and the BMW that was really ground shaking was that these guys came in and put in a European flair. Obviously, the S1000R is significantly different from the R1, especially the previous generation R1. More like the GSX-R, but better. The kind of thing that you really want to see in a sport bike. Aprilia and Ducati have come out of the V-twin era, really, and Aprilia went to the V4, and Ducati stuck with the V-twin for the street line and went for V4 for the racing. And now they're getting ready to bring that V4 engine they have in their GP bike into the production market. Now that's about to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how that changes it. Honda obviously has had V4s for quite a while, and also V-twins in their sport bike market for years and years and years. These things go around in circles. 1 minute it's technology, the next minute it's performance, the next minute it's reduced cost. It all goes around and around. It's basically, you're talking about two-wheel technology. The only real earth-shattering change that can happen is that we see more electric bikes. And frankly, Zero's had electric bikes. That's all they've done is electric bikes, and people laughed at them and laughed at them and laughed at them because the recharge time was so long. Finally, they got off their ass and solved the recharge problem by basically trying to take advantage of the superchargers supplies that the Tesla market has. And now there are kits that will allow you to recharge your electric bike in an hour to give you that 150 mile an hour range using supercharger stations. And it's going to be interesting to see if people continue to buy gas bikes for the price and the versatility, or they go electric because it's green and it's quiet and fast. And we're going to have quite a range of products on the market. But I can't leave without one last passing shot at the Ninja 300 and its whole category of bikes like the R3. People keep talking about how these bikes are so safe because they have no power. Then next breath, they want to talk about how they have enough power and they're perfectly safe on the highway. And then they want to say, oh, it's a perfect bike for people who have no experience. And then they want to say when people who have no experience go out and buy these bikes and wreck them anyway, how it would have been so much worse if that person had had a bike with real power. Look, you can't win that argument. The bikes are slow for motorcycles. They're still motorcycles. They're unsafe. People who ride these bikes who have no riding experience are not going to be safe on any bike. It doesn't matter if it's a freaking Grom. They're still not going to be safe on it. And it's just not the kind of thing you want to do. People are riding these bikes to demonstrate to themselves and to the world that they are capable of handling a motorcycle, and half of the people who do that are not going to be capable of handling a motorcycle safely. It's just how it is. They're either not going to be interested in riding safely, or they're not going to be able to ride safely. So please forget all this nonsense about buying a woefully underpowered street bike as your first bike to ride on the street. Get something with a decent amount of power, please, for yourself, for your own self, if nothing else. You do not have to ride it fast. You do not have to use all the power, okay? But have it there in case you need it and when you're ready. And okay, you're saving some money, there's no question. By buying a cheap bike with no power, you're saving some money, but that is because they are making the bike cheap. And the money you save by buying that cheap bike is as much putting your life in even more risk as anything else, okay? You have to ask yourself, is your life worth saving $3,000 on a motorcycle? Is it worth that? Because the time is going to come where you're going to find out, yes, that actually does put your life at greater risk. Cheaper brakes, a woefully underpowered engine, crappy tires, a bad suspension, bad frame, bad everything. Yes, but they got you on two wheels, didn't they? I mean, what closer could you get to a gateway drug than a motorcycle that's only $3,000 being sold to 17 to 21-year-old kids who don't know how to ride, have almost no experience with riding, and have a limited financial support anyway for riding, which is one reason why they want to buy a dirt cheap bike.